Jerry Hoffman is a legendary high school basketball coach in Texas, and she is a good friend of mine. I've gotten to know her through recovery, and I think we'd be friends if in any other circumstance in life, but I think now we're effective friends, and her story is fascinating, it's inspiring, and it's so interesting. Stay tuned for the last part. We closed down shop here, and then it occurred to me that she had actually donated a kidney to one of her former players' mother, and that story is amazing. And none of it, any of this stuff on the back end of her drinking is possible without sobriety. She lives a full life, and it's a life you're going to want to hear about. And that is coming up. But first, Kevin Souza. All right, Jerry. First of all, thank you very much for the Diet Coke. Are you nervous, Jerry?
Yes, I'm nervous.
Why?
Oh, I love your podcast.
Yeah.
You've had great people on here.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you compare to some of the people you've had on here?
Well, trust me. I think that you are of I hold you in very high regard. You actually, now it's cool because this goes back to the podcast. I didn't know who you were. I'd heard of you. I knew you were married to Kevin, your husband. But I had Kevin, my sponsor, on here. This is like a year and a half ago now, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Almost 2 years.
No. It was actually in July of last year.
It was July last year.
Yes.
It was before that.
No.
No, you didn't hear it till July.
I didn't hear that. I did not hear the podcast until July. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I remember I did it in April or March when I was with my old girlfriend. I remember thinking like, God, I got to get out of this when I talked to Kevin. So Kevin is a friend of yours, and I remember so well, Jerry, he showed me a text message, and he wouldn't show me who it was from. He wouldn't. But he said, and it was from you, and it talked about how you listened to our conversation, and you were kind of recommitted to getting back. You were sober, but you wanted to kind of get back into recovery.
Yeah. Let me just tell you how I got to you. So I listened to another podcast. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. Yeah.
So the name of the podcast is Bloody Happy Hour. You were doing the O.J. Simpson deal with those girls.
Those girls are awesome. That
are.
podcast is incredible.
I listen to it every week.
Yeah.
So you were doing that podcast, and in the middle of the podcast, they gave you a little plug on Pay Off with Pete.
That makes perfect sense because that was July.
Yeah. So I was like, Pay Off with Pete. Let me see what this is about. So as soon as I heard that, I was actually running. So after I finished that particular podcast, then I went over to Pay Off with Pete, and Kevin was on that. It just so happened that I clicked on the one that Kevin E. was on.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my gosh. So I listened to his podcast, and in his story, he mentioned that he had been 4.5 years sober, and he went back out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just a little over 4 years sober, and I was not working the program. Wasn't doing anything I was still sober, and I still wasn't drinking, but I wasn't happy. And so it scared me when I heard him, like, because once you get to about a year, you go, I got this.
Yeah.
You gotta keep working it every day.
Yeah.
And when I'm sitting in a meeting and I hear somebody that's got 35 years sober, but they're still in a meeting, I'm like, that's gonna be me, because I've got to stay connected. And if I don't stay connected, I'm gonna end up being unhappy.
Yeah.
So that's how immediately after I heard him, I had his phone number, so I sent him a text message. And the next day I got into my meeting, and I think you were there.
Yeah.
And so I've been going to that meeting. It's a great meeting, and I go there every day that I can.
So hold on. All right. So if you're listening to Jerry now, you can tell she's a coach. You have a way of speaking. It's articulate, but it's also inspirational. You're a historic Texas women's high school basketball coach. Was it hard for you to stop drinking? We're going to get into your story, but this is just topical stuff that is on my mind. Being a coach, having an ego that it takes to be a successful coach, was it hard for you to stop drinking because you've got to turn your will over, per se, or you've got to, it's not, for me, it wasn't will. I couldn't will myself to stop drinking. There was more to it than that. Was that difficult?
It was very difficult. So I thought in the beginning, that I could control it because I'm a coach and I like to control things. And so I would just that in my mind, I was just going to control it. And there would be brief periods of time that I could go a week or 2 weeks and I would not have to drink. And so I was like, well, this is me being able, and at any moment I could never have a drink again. In my mind, that's what I told myself. But in reality, that wasn't the truth. And there was a specific point, and we'll get into it, that I stepped over the edge of not even being able to go a week without having a drink.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was difficult. It was difficult to say that I'm not a winner, because I'm competitive. And that part of me of saying that I can't figure out how to do this by myself was a very, very difficult period for me.
Okay. So you grew up in Texas. Your family life growing up. I've heard you talk about both of your parents and your siblings, but what was that like, if you could paint a picture of your childhood?
My childhood revolved around, well, we lived in a very small town, and it's a town my dad grew up in. And
what town is it? I love getting into Texas towns.
The name of the town's Grayford. It's right between Graham and Weatherford. So
Okay.
that's the reason for the name of the town. There's a lake really close, Possum Kingdom Lake. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's a nice lake. And
for people who don't know, what is close to these small towns?
well, it's 50 miles northwest of Fort Worth.
Okay.
So, it was a really small town, and our life revolved around, the only sport in the town was basketball. And really and truly, your self-worth was ranked on what kind of player you were. Going all the way back to my dad, like during the time my dad was in high school. And even today, they've won 2 state championships in a row. And I mean, life revolves around basketball. There's no football. There's other sports, but not taken very seriously. So, our life revolved around school. I have 2 older sisters. Well, I have 3 older sisters, but one of my sisters is 12 years older, so quite a bit older. And then I had another sister that's has passed away. But so they had a different father. Their father died in an accident. And so my mom had a difficult life to start off with. Her parents, on the way home from work, ran into a train and it killed them when she was 17. And so then she married, and her husband was killed in an oil field accident about 8 years after they were married. So she had a difficult time. So she had these 2 kids, and then she met my dad, and my dad and mom, they had my brother, and then I have another sister that's 11 months older than me, and then I'm the youngest. And I make sure that everybody knows when we're together that I am the youngest. But maybe that's a little bit of that alcoholic. But
any alcoholism in your, I mean, we're talking about now, I mean, unfortunate, tragic situations that took away parts of your family. So I guess, to your knowledge, do you know anything about alcoholism in your mom or dad?
So I saw my mother drink a salty dog drink one time in my entire life. One.
Okay.
And I think that's the only one she ever had. And so no alcohol on that side. And then my dad, when we moved to this, we lived in West Texas until I was 5. And then we moved to his hometown. And I don't recall this because I was young. But at some point, I think he went out with his old friends and his old running buddies. And he had a bit to drink, and my mother said, "That's it. We're not staying here if that's what you're going to do." And I never saw him drink again. And so that reinforced my thought process that, well, if you decide one day that you're not going to ever drink again, my dad did it.
Yeah,
I should be able to do it.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. So there was never alcohol in our house. Never, at family get-togethers, there was some members of our family that drank quite a lot, quite frequently. And so I've seen, cousins, uncles, whatever, on the couch passed out. So, I saw it, but as far as our family went, it was never present in our home. How
was sports a part of your childhood? Like, as far as you and your success?
I happen to be a part of a really good team. And
here we go right away. You're deflecting credit.
No. I was part of a very good team, and I don't know if you may even be too young to know this, but back then in Texas, girls basketball was a game of 6-on-6.
I did not know that.
So there were 3 players on one end that were the forwards are the ones that got to be on offense, and then 3 players on the opposite at half court on the other end that they played nothing but defense, so they never got to shoot the ball. And so they would defend the offensive team of the opponent. Okay, so
like football.
So that's the way it works.
Or soccer.
But you could not cross the half court line. So basically, it was a game of 3-on-3.
Wow.
Within a team that I don't know how to explain it, but that's the way.
Was your high school career like that? Like that's
no. So I was
about to say, Jerry.
I was the part of the group that I played 2 years of 6-man, and then in 1978 was the last year to play 6-man basketball in Texas, and so 79 was the first year for 5-on-5.
Wow.
And it was really interesting during that time. There were coaches that were so opposed
to going 5-on-5
because women were not strong enough to play that type of game. So I think Oklahoma was the last state to switch over to 5-on-5.
And I can remember just knowing basketball like I do. I think the first women's Final Four was in the 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, the sport in itself was really starting to kind of matriculate and take off.
And I got to be a part of it. I got to be a part of that transition from 6-on-6 to 5-on-5, and then I went to college and played at MCC here in Waco, and then at Mary Hardin Baylor, and we were playing 5-on-5.
Okay.
And so I got to be a part of the transition from, the different type of a game, but also I was in the middle of girls basketball in the beginning, and then the time that it exploded.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything really and truly revolved. We lived across the street from the school, so in the morning you'd wake up and go straight to the gym and get some shots in before you got ready.
Oh, really?
For school, yeah. And so that was the case with my brother and myself, and my sister. She played a couple of years, but she was a cheerleader and she was good at that. So,
how about alcohol when you were a kid? For you, when was the first time you drank or had a sip of beer? Not the first time you were drunk, but the first time you can just remember it, hitting your lips.
Oh, I was 5. And this is why, you have to understand too, during that time, people used to believe that, alcohol was an elixir. And so you might, if you have a cold or something, they're going to mix something up for you and you're going to have to drink a hot toddy. Mm-hmm. So whiskey would be the solution for a lot of different things. Here, you just take a little shot of this and that'll get rid of it.
Yeah, toothache or whatever.
Yeah, and so I can remember being, about 5 and having a drink of something because I was sick or, but the first time I can remember voluntarily picking something up, I was at a wedding and there was champagne.
How old were you? Like 20?
I was 7.
Oh, you were 7.
And so there was champagne, and I remember picking the champagne glass up and taking a sip of it, and I thought it was the worst thing I'd ever tasted in my. And so then I was like, oh, that's horrible. Why would anybody drink? Why are all these people drinking that? I didn't understand why they were doing it.
Did you make it through high school and college without developing any sort of dependency, or not necessarily dependency, but just drinking to have fun? My thing was a dependency, right? But it was social. It was like, I had a social dependence on it. I had no idea, but it was like, this is fun. This enables me to be fun. This is what people do to have fun. Did you have any of that?
No, I really didn't. There would be an occasion. And the drinking age back then, I'm dating myself again, it was 18.
Okay.
And so before I graduated from high school, I could go to the liquor store and purchase whatever.
By the way, Jerry looks like a kid if you're listening to this. I mean, really. So you keep talking about yourself like yeah.
Well, so like high school kids could purchase alcohol. And so it was pretty common that, it wasn't a big deal. And I'm not going to say that I didn't drink on occasion, but because of basketball, I didn't, if you want to be the best player you can be, then you don't drink. And so that carried me on all the way through college. If you don't, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say that I never drank. I'm not saying that, but it didn't take a hold of me. And so, I drink on occasion, and I think there was an occasion or two that I drank too much, but it was one of those things like I ain't going to do that again. And I wouldn't for a long time.
Anybody in your close circle coming up, like drink a lot, whether it was a man or a woman, when you were like, wow, this person's drinking a good amount, whether it was a teammate or somebody or boyfriend?
Well, I was playing college basketball, and we went on a trip, and so the drinking age went from 18 to 19. and then it went from 19 to 21.
Okay.
And that was the progression. And so I believe it must have been my sophomore year. So, because the drinking age was 19, we'd gone on a trip, and some girls on my team, they drank because they were old enough to drink, and we got caught. I was in the room with them. We got caught. I did not drink, but I was not, like for me, I was to tell on them or to be the one that said, yeah, that girl, and that girl were the ones drinking. For me, it was more important to have a camaraderie with my team than it was for me to tell on them. So I just took the punishment too.
Really?
And so
Okay.
I started noticing at that time, I had a couple of teammates that had that I noticed were having problems. Like every single time we did something, I was like, man, they can't have fun without drinking. I mean, and that thought did cross my mind.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was crazy because we were playing basketball. This is the funnest game that you could ever play. So how can you not be having fun playing basketball?
Yeah. How did your career go? I mean, would you graduate in the early 80s, or were you finish? Like, what's the timeline look like?
Well, so I graduated from high school in 80.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
I came to MCC and played here. And so I played 2 years, and then the next year the team actually went to the national tournament. They didn't
wow.
win it, but they were a good team.
Who was the best player you played against?
Oh, goodness. Best player I played against.
Did you ever go up against Kim Mulkey?
No. Uh-uh.
Okay.
No, she's younger than I am. But
Okay.
besides that, we played pretty much in Texas.
Okay.
So
I know she was Louisiana.
yes.
Yeah.
So she was at La Tech. But so again, I keep saying back then, I wish I had a different term to use, but there weren't really class divisions. There were
Cheney went to the Final Four and won. I think they lost in the championship.
right.
I mean, it's hard to find it on a map in
Right.
Pennsylvania.
Right. So that we were part of what was called the TIAW.
Okay.
So it was the Texas Association of Intercollegiate Women's and whatever. So we were part of that. And we would, like teams played everybody. There wasn't Division I. We were in a conference, but so there was a junior college conference when I was at MCC, and it was strong. The junior college teams were really good. And then there wasn't much difference between, you could be on a great junior college team and they could go play a Division I
Texas,
school and really compete well with them.
Yeah.
And so the divisions, they were not a lot, it wasn't a huge gaps like they are today. But when I was at Mary Hardin Baylor, we did play teams like Sam Houston, and they had some good players on them. But when I was at MCC, we played against Cook County, which is, I don't even know the name of it now, but it's in Denison, Texas, and they were part of our conference. And there was a girl named Dee Dee Polk on the team, and
I've heard of her.
and she was like one of the best players I've ever played
Yes.
against.
Okay. Yeah. Why do I? She was like a historic figure, right?
Yeah. She ended up being a really, really good player.
Okay. So in college, not too much drinking in high school. See, I could talk to you about your career all day. So not too much drinking in high school, barely any in college. You go on, and what does your life look like after college? Like when does alcohol? I know you obviously. Well, I don't know. Do you get right into coaching?
I did. I got right into coaching. I got married to a Waco guy, and I went right into coaching. Started my career at Rosebud Lot, and I was.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, was there 1 year, and then I came to Robinson as the head volleyball coach. Susie Snyder, who's a very, she was a national recognized figure at Baylor, like All-American at Baylor.
Volleyball.
No, basketball.
Basketball, okay.
She was the head basketball coach at Robinson. She hired me, and I came over and coached volleyball, and then eventually she left, and eventually I ended up being the head basketball coach.
So you're the head basketball coach. You're leading young women.
Yeah.
First of all, how'd you do?
Oh, good. We did well. we did well, but we were in difficult. So we played for the furthest I ever made it was at Robinson was
State regionals.
We at the regional finalists.
Okay.
So we ended up getting beat there, but
Look, you're still pissed. So when
McGregor beat us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was
another
McGregor. They were
Central
they were
Texas
in
team.
our district, and we split. So we split, had a playoff game. Anyway, so we ended up going all the way back to the regional finals, and they ended up beating us in the regional final.
So when does alcohol Because you get married, you get divorced.
I did.
Did alcohol play a role in that at all?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. And so, you know, it was one of those situations at the time. I was heartbroken for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I have a good relationship with, I don't have ill feelings about that situation. And pretty quickly after we divorced, I didn't have those toxic negative feelings that a lot of people have after a divorce, which was great.
Yeah.
But, you know, during that time,
Some people might say it's because you got a great attitude.
well, I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't, and, you know, and it's funny to me because I think about this now. I wasn't even in a program, but I realized at that point, pretty quickly what my part was in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, oh wow, it's not all his fault.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a lot of it was, you know, I was pretty selfish and self-centered back then. I have been my whole life, but I just didn't know it. But anyway, so we get a divorce, and unfortunately, I decided that the place to meet the next person would be, you know, at a bar.
How does that work?
Well, not very well.
When does your drinking start to take
Well,
off?
so I drank some steadily during that time. Then I got into a relationship that drinking was very important to that person, and so I increased my intake to keep up. And
When did you notice that you started to really enjoy it?
I'm gonna say I was 35.
35.
Years old. Yeah.
So that's important for people. I mean, this isn't like a tutorial or whatever, but I you hear that frequently in rooms of recovery. It's not like you come out of the womb an alcoholic, or maybe you were predisposed or whatever. You can talk about that on another podcast. But regardless, some people don't really develop into a primetime alcoholic that they're eventually going to be until their 30s or 40s sometimes.
Right. And, you know, in my situation, I was 35. I was in this relationship, and I made some, you know, I don't know. I guess I was insecure. I don't know.
Yeah.
I could really analyze it and probably come up with a reason why I did that. But whenever I was in this relationship, pretty much I was a people pleaser. So whatever everybody else wanted to do, I just went along with it. And, and I found myself drinking more and more and more. And that just became, and unfortunately, that's the way kind of America is. Like, hey, people don't say, hey, you want to go get a Diet Coke? They go, hey, you want to meet for a drink, you know? And that just became our lifestyle. And so some very difficult things happened during that time. And don't really want to go into what those were, but I put myself in a position where let me think how I want to put this.
Yeah.
So I put myself in a position that was not very safe.
Yeah.
And so I'm at this time I'm the girls coordinator, and I'm leading these groups of girls, and I'm telling them all the time, don't put yourself in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Don't drink, don't do this, don't do that. And that's the situations that I was putting myself in. And so some pretty negative things happened, and I just kept it all to myself because I didn't want to be a hypocrite and say, just don't do what I do, but do what I say.
Yeah, I mean, that's we talked here about, you know, my brother Michael and I, right down the hallway about, you know, I know your sister passed away from cancer. My brother just passed away from cancer. He was sober, and he was a therapist in California, and he was talking to these kids about, hey, don't do X, Y, and Z, and then he's going out and doing it. And I think it was quite a cross to bear for him. I think it really kind of pushed him in that direction. And it sounds like that's sort of what you're saying. You're working with young kids. It's just like something my buddy Murph and I call it last snow on the roof. That's from the Northeast. But you get a snow on the roof of the car, you know, like you got to get that off or it'll crush you.
Right.
You know?
And so I got out of that relationship, and I ended up working with and marrying somebody that I worked with.
Yeah.
And
the great Kevin.
Yeah, the great Kevin. Yes, great coach. And I'm blessed. So we got married, and
he's the best. People don't know. Everybody, you got to wake up early and work hard to find somebody that's going to say something negative about Kevin. And he's also on the front lines as a coach. I mean, that's not the most popular figure in the world either, right? I mean, you're a coach.
Yeah,
you're open. You're a high school football coach in Texas, and you're a damn good one. You're open for criticism. You know, that's people like to take their shots. And which, by the way, if you're in a Mart football game, Jerry will be there to shoot right back.
Well, that's the thing. He can handle the shot. Like he is so good at just. Well, they're fans.
Yeah.
Fans short for fanatic, And so he's good about it. I'm not good about it because I'm going to tell you, you say something bad about him, I'm going to say something bad about you.
Yeah.
So, which isn't good, but.
So you're married. So you meet Kevin, and this is when the drinking has started to really kind of take off.
I started after the situation with that guy that I was dating happened.
Yeah. You weren't married or anything.
No, I wasn't married.
Yeah.
And
did this thing kind of make you break up with him?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So, so then Kevin and I get together and we left Robinson. That was difficult because, I don't want to say Robinson.
That's all right.
Okay. We left the school that we were at.
Okay.
And,
we can take that out.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
And so we left the school that I was at and.
Where you met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, went to East Texas and had some success, but there wasn't anything to do there. So we drank a little bit more. I drank a little bit more, excuse me.
Yeah.
I drank a little bit more. And then I moved to North Texas, to the Metroplex, and just kind of habit, but still hadn't started. I was still able to.
How were you as a coach?
I was still doing the deal. I was still not. I mean, I was still making it. I was still going to practice. I was still working hard. I was still doing all, and so the alcohol consumption took place afterward.
Yeah, and by the way, at this point in time, your brother is a rising star in the coaching ranks, and so I just know this from being an athlete and being around coaches and players my whole life. That's the culture. It's like, hey, we're gonna drink hard, we're gonna wake up, and we're gonna kick ass, and nobody's gonna outwork us. So it's almost like that, because that was something that I had. Everybody, all the men around me that I was like looked up to. Were it's the old thing. Like I heard Dave Casper, the old Raiders wide receiver, who would drink all the time and then go out and play the next day. And somebody's like, Jesus Christ, Dave! Like I can't believe you're playing today after last night. I saw you. He's like, you got to teach your body who's boss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's win or lose, I've got the booze, and so that was kind of the that's kind of the, if you win, you're going to go celebrate. And if you lose, you got to cry on your beer. You know what I'm saying? So
I do, yeah.
It was one of those things that I was still doing it, still getting after it, still doing it. And so then my mother passed away, and that was pretty significant for me. And she was alone when she passed away, and that bothered me a lot because I felt like I should have been there. And then a year after that, my nephew passed away. So now I'm 50 and moved back to Waco. And so then I had lost a series of people. My husband's mom passed away, and then my father-in-law passed away, and then my sister died of cancer. And so I had determined at that time that I was losing all these people because God was punishing me. And so, just whatever I could do to make myself not hurt, then that's what I was going to do. And that's when I went over, that's when I went from, really and truly, alcohol had begun being a problem, but had not taken hold of me until that time. And at that time, it was my solution for everything.
And what started to happen?
Oh, I mean, I went from, I always tried to, and I wasn't great at it, but I always tried to, if I was going to drink, not drink in the town that I coached in, not be seen. And so I went from that to I was going to stop at the convenience store at the edge of town, and just get whatever I was going to get, start drinking on the way home. So, and everything at that point I did, I wouldn't even go to the movies because
you couldn't drink there.
Yeah. You can now.
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah.
Bitter about that. But anyway, like there were things that I didn't want to do them.
I noticed that about my dad. Not that you're old enough where you could be my parent, but I noticed when I was younger that he doesn't want to go anywhere where he can't drink. Like it didn't hit me. Like I remember my mom being like, he'll never go to the movies. And I'd be like, and that was why. And I was like, wow. And then lo and behold, here I am 10, 20 years later, sneaking a bottle of wine into the movie theater. And I'm like, oh shit. And that's, Yeah, I that is so relatable.
Right.
Where those are the sort of corners alcoholics start to cut, just so you can you start to kind of remove yourself from society, whether you want to admit it or not, and even if you're not admitting it, right, your subconscious feels it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And you just begin pulling further and further away. And then the other part is when you're not drinking, you got that voice, and I refer to the voice in my head as the crazy lady because she is crazy. And so whenever if I'm not drinking, and I've taken myself out of society, and I'm spending a lot more and more time alone, and I've got the lady in my head talking to me, then the next thing I know is I'm half.
She's doing a lot of work.
She's doing a lot of work.
She's got center stage in your brain.
Yes.
And that's another thing that I can relate. Alcoholic to alcoholic. Anytime. This is me. I was drunk most of the day by the time I was done because I had such shame as surrounding the way that I was carrying myself that I couldn't really handle it. I remember one time my dad called me. Again, my father was like a great man, great influence, but I had just gotten like a DUI and I was living in Charlotte, and I was, I'm in my early 30s, and I remember talking to him, and it was like 11 in the morning, and he was like, "You're drinking right now, I can tell it." And I remember thinking like, well, that's because I had to get up and call you, like shit. But it was like, it's all, it just becomes that thing. It's your crutch.
Oh yeah.
And
so into my 50s, women change, into their bodies change, and so I would get to sleep. So I would drink, I would get to sleep, and then I would start having like hot flashes or sweats or whatever. And then
talking about menopause.
Yes,
yeah,
I am.
Okay. Yeah.
And so so I would wake up and I would be awake. And I do have people that ever spend any time around me would say, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So I'm a bit ADD. So I would wake up in the middle of the night, then my brain would start going, and I would be looking at the clock, and it would be 3:00 in the morning. And I would be going, "I got to go to sleep. I got to go to sleep. I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow. I've got to go to school. I've got to do all this stuff." So the solution, any sane person would go, "Well, just drink some wine."
Yeah.
And so
100%.
And so that then
sane me and you, insane anybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would do. And so people have asked me, "Did you ever drink at school?" No, I didn't drink at school. But you give me a test, then whatever was left over from 3 a.m. was still in my system.
Yeah.
And so that's where I got to where it became a bigger and bigger and bigger problem.
Yeah. How did it affect your coaching at all?
I don't think it did, but in retrospect now.
Well,
especially whenever, we still were, we were still winning. We were still, my teams were doing well, and I was still working really hard. But I was still drinking a lot.
No, what's that like? Because as somebody who was lazy until I got sober and found stuff I was really passionate about, I feel like I've changed a lot in that regard. But there are also people who, like yourself, who I just believe like, you're a workaholic and an alcoholic at the same time.
Right.
How the hell does that work? How does that? I don't understand it.
Well, I used to think that sleep was a habit. So if you get too much sleep, it's just because you're being lazy. You need to get up and go. So I believed that. I really and truly believed that the sleep that I could get whenever I passed out from drinking, and then I woke up at 3, so that would be enough sleep. So if I could just, whatever I needed to do to get the job done, I would stay and get the job done. But when that job was done, then my other job started, and that job was drinking. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't make any. So I had 2 jobs, and I was going to do both jobs as hard as I could do them.
Yeah. And at this time, it's worth mentioning, your brother's really kicking ass. Billy Gillespie's your brother, and he's having a sensational coaching career.
Yeah. But he had been at Kentucky, and then that didn't work out very well. And then he'd gone to Texas Tech, and then from there he'd gone to Ranger. That's where he started. Uh-huh. He played there. And so he went back to Ranger, and he was having success at Ranger. And, so he about this little bit after this, he he was in need of a kidney transplant. And so once he got to the point that he had to have a kidney, so I'm not sure whether he had a heart attack or what predicated him getting to the place that they said you got to have a kidney. But so he told us that we had to have a kidney transplant, and Mayo Clinic sent me this box.
And what year? What? How old is this? Like, let's get it back in context to how you are in your drinking.
So I started off talking about I was when I started going through menopause, I was 50-ish, 51, 52. And so now we're talking about I was 55.
Yeah, okay.
So during that 3-year time frame, I hit it pretty hard.
Yeah.
And so had a lot of success in my coaching, volleyball and basketball. I was a head basketball and head volleyball coach. And so he was in the need of a kidney, and so he was going to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So they sent me this box. So I was going to be a kidney donor. And, in retrospect now I go, yeah, well, they looked at my liver enzymes and were like, no, she's not a match. No. So all they said was, no, I'm sorry, you're not a match.
Okay.
But they did an article, and he ended up with a lady that matched, and so,
crazy story. Who did he end up?
So
it was somebody that heard about it.
Yeah. So there was a newspaper reporter, Dallas Morning News, that had heard about his plight and wanted, the need for kidneys is huge in the United States.
I mean,
huge.
I mentioned
100,000.
And I mentioned my old girlfriend, wonderful person. Our relationship didn't work out. She was a kidney surgeon, and it was amazing to see that, like, a kidney comes into play that might get used, and usually it's somebody dies, or it's a donor, but like it's just like a mad scramble. These things are like golden nuggets,
right?
And you've got to get them into somebody's body. It's just, and the list is long of folks waiting for them. It's just, it's really, it's hard to wrap your mind around the situation, and it's something the regular person has very little education in.
Exactly, and so this Dallas Morning newspaper reporter came out and did an article on.
Who's the reporter? You remember?
I don't remember.
Okay, I could tell you're trying to think about it.
I was
Okay,
trying to think.
That's all right.
But so he came out and this lady reads the article. Her husband is a basketball coach in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, at a directional Oklahoma school, South.
Direction.
Yeah, I don't remember which one's in Tahlequah.
Okay.
He's no longer there, like Southeastern, Southwestern, one of those schools.
Okay.
Anyway, so she reads the article and she says, I think God's leading me to see if I'm a match. Perfect match. So she donates her kidney to my brother. And so I take off.
And you're super close with your brother.
I am.
Yeah.
And I take off from school. This was in April. And take off from school. And I go to Rochester. He's rented a house. He has to be up there 6 weeks. And so they have the transplant. Everything goes good with the surgery. So I stay with him. Kevin is getting an award back here in Central Texas. So I fly back. And when I flew back, I rented a car and drove back. So I stopped at the Whataburger in Hillsboro just to rest because I got upgraded on the airplane to first class. I mean, and if you get upgraded to first class, you have
there's no other choice. What are you going to do?
You got.
Yeah. Oh, it could be 7 a.m. or whatever. It's like, hey, I got to do it. Yeah.
But it was late at night, and so anyway, I rented a car and I drove. I got to Hillsboro, and I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be driving. So I pulled at the Whataburger. I pulled over at the Whataburger.
This is in between Dallas and Waco, right? Yeah.
And so I pulled over at the Whataburger, and I just stopped. I'm in the car. I just laid my head back. Car running.
Yeah.
Parked. Knock, knock, knock on the window. I don't know how much time later. So I get arrested and end up getting a DWI for being parked in the Whataburger parking lot.
And so what happens next? I mean, what happens next?
Well, I mean, and so.
Were you driving back for the award ceremony?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the award ceremony was a couple of days late. That was on a Thursday night, and the awards deal was on a Saturday.
Okay.
And so I shamefully went to the awards thing, and then on Monday, Kevin drove me to treatment.
Wow.
So, yeah. But honestly, people have asked me, seriously, like you could have fought that. Like really.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you were just sitting there, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I've been in close calls before. Had been stopped, and it ended up being a student, that had stopped me and like, hey, you got somebody that come pick you up. You know what I'm saying? So several situations before that I just.
Do you remember what happened when you get, how did you handle yourself?
Not very well.
Okay.
I mean, that was just, not good.
Okay.
I mean,
because honestly, it's so funny because the Jerry I know today would be like, all right, you got me, let's go.
Yeah, no, that was not the Jerry back then. What are you talking about? I'm sitting here.
Yeah,
Is
okay.
it against the law to sit here? Like. Yeah.
So you go to treatment. You go to what, La Hacienda?
Yes, yeah.
And which one did you go to?
In Kerrville.
Okay, that's outside San Antonio.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you wrap your arms around treatment, or did you, or were you like? Because for me, I was like, I don't even know how bad I needed it. Everybody else did. My buddy Scott says when you're an alcoholic, you're the last to know. I always knew I was an alcoholic, but I didn't know how bad I needed recovery.
Right.
And,
at that point, and there had been moments prior to this, several months prior to this, that I would look at myself in the mirror, getting ready for school or whatever I was getting ready for, and I would tell myself, today's going to be the day that you don't drink. And that wasn't the day. I mean, I could not drink. And so I had already resigned myself to the fact that I couldn't do it by myself, but I had too much pride to ask anyone else at that point for help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when I had gotten to that point, once I got out of jail and went to this awards ceremony, and Monday rolls around, and I never knew that you could go to treatment intoxicated.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know.
Oh yeah.
I thought people. So I didn't drink anything from like Friday or whenever I got
You
out
wanted
of
to be
jail.
all buttoned up.
Yeah, I was
right?
all buttoned up, and like I was going. This girl comes in when I was the intake or whatever you call it. I tell the nurse, I think she's been drinking, and she was like, "Yeah, no shit." And I was going, wait a minute. And so then I told Kevin, they want me to come back next week.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I was trying to get another week.
Did what happened then? No.
He did not.
Okay.
No, you don't.
A buddy of mine told me, "Hey, like it doesn't matter how you go." And I remember, boy, did I rode that one till the wheels came off.
Yeah.
I was barely. I when I got there, I was 3 sheets.
Yeah, I was man. So like I was again. There was another little bit of resentment there that I didn't have my last hurrah.
What was the support like from Kevin, your husband?
Well, on the way to treatment, all these people had been calling me, texting me, asking me about. I mean, my brother just had a transplant, so I had Division I big time college coaches texting me, "Hey, how's Billy? How's he doing? How's And so I got a text message from a guy he used to coach with, and he said, "Hey, what's going on? Your brother told me that he had just gotten some tough news." So immediately I'm going, something happened. Something, like this is on the trip down there. And I keep going on and on, like going, we've got to find out. And I can't get, and Kevin's going, I think the tough news that he got was that I'm taking you, his sister, to treatment. And then that never occurred to me that would be the tough news, know? And he told me, once I did talk to him, he said, do everything they tell you to do and do it as hard as you can do it. And
once you talk to Billy?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, your husband, Kevin, is a child of 2 deaf parents. Mm-hmm. So when he talks, there's some cachet. Exactly. It's pronounced, his message.
Yes.
So I'm sure that got through to you, because he's not the kind of guy that says, I told you so, or wants to deliver shitty news.
Right. So his words are few, but they're meaningful.
Yeah.
And so, it never occurred to me that was my thing is something bad. Like something bad for him physically was happening. It never occurred to me that he would be concerned about me.
So
my siblings, very supportive, and I told them exactly what to do. Don't contact me. Don't do this. Don't do that. Blah, blah, blah. So I told them all, exactly what to do. None of them did it. But
I had the same exact experience.
yeah.
So you get there. What did you notice about treatment and recovery? What were some of your first impressions? Had you been to any kind of meeting before this?
I'd gone to a meeting, but I didn't understand what was going on.
Okay.
I truly did.
What led you to that meeting?
Well,
Curiosity or
no,
consequence?
No, at that time I was like, I mean, people around me were telling me,
Okay.
you need to
Yeah.
you need to slow down. You need to, you know, like, let's try to do something different. But, so I did not also, I mean, this is how naive I am. And I'm by this time, I'm a mature person at this place.
Yeah.
A lot of younger people. But I truly thought that you went to treatment and you got well. And that you went to treatment once. You know, that was your last straw. You go to treatment for 28 days, and then after that 28
You're
days,
cured.
you were fine. There'd be some work to do, but you would never have to go back again. And what was good for me was that there were all these other people in there that said, yeah, this is my fourth treatment. You've been to a treatment center 4 times. I mean, and you know, we were coaches. So we had great insurance, but it didn't pay for all of it. And I was like, I got to get it the first time. We can't afford for me to do this twice. And so I did everything I was told to do. Everything. I never missed a meeting class. I never missed anything. And so,
Where I went to rehab, they had a relapse unit. I was like, holy shit, they got a whole, like, this is not something that happens once in a while.
right.
Like, because there was no judgment. I was like, wow, like, this is, you know, you really need to take this seriously when you get out. I think a lot of that stuff, I wasn't like a brilliant thinker in there per se, but a lot of stuff kind of sunk in.
Right.
And I remember being shocked, but like, wow, they got like this, the relapse thing is common, way more common than I want to admit. Almost like you said, like, there's just like it's sinking in, like, oh my gosh, like, this is just a huge deal. Like, people fight this forever.
Right.
Till the day they die. And many are unsuccessful.
Oh, yeah.
Which is terrifying.
And you know, when I was there, there was a doctor that spoke to our group. They keep about, I don't know if that's still the case, but there were around 100 people there. And so he said, look around. 95 of you are going to be doing what you did last year or last week or whatever. 95. 5 of you will make it. And that's it. And some of y'all are going to be dead. And that's as blunt as he said it. And I was like, I'm going to be one of the 5. I'm going to be, hey, sir, I wanted to raise my hand. Sir, I'm going to be one of the 5. And so hearing things like that I can never drink again. I mean, I can't dip my toe in it. I can't say, oh, well, I'll be sober for a year and then we'll see. Mm-mm. I learned there that I was done. My drinking career was over.
What else was one of the key, or what were the handful of key things that really shook you up there in a positive way?
That, well, it was a 12-step program. Here's the formula for success. And the formula for success was, you finish your treatment here, and the day you leave, you find a meeting, and you go to a meeting, and you surround yourself with a group of people. And I mean, terms that I can understand. You travel in a pack. The one that gets away over there is going to be the one that gets eaten.
Mm-hmm.
So you get in a pack, you get in a group of people, and you stay in a group, and that group will help keep you sober.
And you stay in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Because the ones on the outside are the ones that get clipped.
Right. So, I mean, and I was so, you know, it's kind of like when I went to college. I went into college knowing everything there was that you could possibly know, and I graduated from college feeling like I was one of the dumbest people ever. Because, you know, at some point you realize what you don't know. And so when I came out of treatment, I had this formula that they'd given me, and I was going to follow that formula to a T. And, you know, I can follow directions. And so they told me when I got out to go to a meeting, and then they suggested that I go to outpatient treatment, which I did. And then they suggested that I go to a bunch of meetings and like 90 meetings in 90 days, which I did. Well, I did more than that. Just want to put that in there. But I did that. And then, I did everything that they told me to do because I wanted to be one of the 5.
Well, so what happens between, there's a bunch of stuff I want to get to, but what happens between the time where you listen to the podcast with Kevin E. and the time where you're going to more than 90 meetings in 90 days? How did you fall into I guess, like a little bit of a sophomore slump?
So
and just stop going to meetings.
Right. So I went for over a year and a half, and then I got back into the workforce, and so I had the time to do it. I just didn't make the time, and so my priorities got mixed up. But I didn't drink. But so the work that I had been doing in the program. Then and I keep saying so that's a bad thing. I decided that I would take what I'd learned in the program and I was going to use it in the real world, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And the people that are, and so.
Wait, no, explain that a little more.
Well, I mean, so you're in the program, everybody's working and they have a common whatever, and everybody knows what you're supposed to do. And so a lot of times you help each other in the program.
Yeah.
Well, whenever at this point in time I was back in the workforce and I was going to take what I learned and I was going to help non-alcoholics or
with these principles,
I was going to fix a lot of their problems. So
by not tending to some of your own.
Exactly.
Right, because once the drink is gone, we're left with us, which is the problem.
And so
for me,
so then COVID hit, and then that just solidified the fact that I didn't need to.
You are not unique as someone who lost their way in like as far as the habits of being a part of during COVID. I mean, there are a shitload of people that just kind of fell off because it was a huge deal. It rocked us all, one way or another. Yeah. So because we were all home, so you were like, screw it.
I'm at home, so I'm not. There's no alcohol at home.
Yeah.
I'm at home, so what kind of damage can I do here? So, I mean, that was my thought process. So I just don't need to go to meetings.
What was happening? So for on the outside, you're great. You're home. You're not drinking. What was happening inside you?
Oh, I was miserable. Like I hear you say it all the time, esteemable acts.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're doing esteemable acts, it gives you self-esteem. And when you're not, then you have self-doubt. And so what was creeping back in was all the self-doubt that I'd had and all the,
crazy lady's taking center stage again.
Yeah. She's, and I'm irritable. What is it? Irritable?
Restless, irritable, and discontent.
And discontent. And I'm not a fun person to live with. I'm not.
And you're a fun person.
I'm not productive in any aspect of my life. And even though that America was at home,
mm-hmm.
You still have to interact with people. And I wasn't good with my family. I wasn't, my siblings. I wasn't good with my husband. I wasn't good with anybody. And so, I do feel like, and and the other part of it is, I am arrogant because I'm going to show everybody how happy I am and not need to drink. And then when you drink, I'm going to tell you that, well, I don't need to drink.
Yeah.
Like I'm better than you are.
I've been there. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't need to drink to have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was going through all that too. And so I feel like now looking back, I was really close to another drink.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, how close do you think you came? I mean, you just answered that.
Opportunity did not present itself where I could do it without anybody knowing.
You're like, you do have a way with words, but you also, I think one of the best parts, or one of the, from 35,000 feet, you and Kevin have a pretty cool relationship. You kind of both do your own thing,
right,
and then you come back together. You spend a good amount of time alone.
I do.
So you would have had every opportunity, if you had crossed that point of no return, to pop in someplace, grab a beer, right. And we hear about it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I travel a lot, and I travel a lot alone.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's anywhere between here and there, I could have just sit down and, had as many as I wanted. I would have thought anything about it.
Yeah.
So, I have gotten better. For a long time, I didn't talk about my story. I didn't talk about, what my life had looked like, but getting better about opening up, because I always say, well, I don't have a story. I don't have anything to tell.
Yeah, right.
But
I've been working on this for a while. I have been.
But the other part of that is I might have something that somebody
needs to hear.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, of course you do. And I think that this conversation there's a shitload of stuff in here. You mentioned something that I find really interesting, because I had this same problem. You have this point when we get sober, we want to be able to, okay, now especially people like you and I who have personalities. Oh, now I want to be having fun. Or now I want to show people that life is fun. It doesn't work like that. No. Like my story is I got sober. I was fucking institutionalized. I got sober for a month. I went to a halfway house for 5 months. Then I was living with another sober guy for a year and a half. Like, yeah, I did really start to feel good inside. Like something was changing. If this was not fun, I wouldn't do it. And early on, it was important that it made me feel good, maybe, before it was fun. Now life is just like, I don't even notice that I'm not drinking. I mean, that's a fact. And I have a lot of fun, but it took a little bit to get there. What was your experience like that? Because you want to go out and be like, look, here I am. I remember my brother Michael had a story about, God, I forget what it was. Both my brother and my dad. My mom told me the story about my dad. But you hear from people, if you're a dry drunk, shit, man, you were a lot more fun when you were drinking.
Oh yeah.
And that is that can get in the crawl a little bit. And honestly, that 95% of the time that happens to somebody when they're not drinking and not doing something to stay fulfilled. I'm not here to beat it over your head that you need to be a 12-step person in sobriety, but you got to do something. Actually, I am here. That's the only thing I know that works, but there are other people have different experiences, but you need to, in my experience, I hate when you say you need to, but doing something that makes you feel fulfilled will make you be lighter and happier, and doing that thing with consistency, which I found in recovery. But that's a long way of asking the same question again. How was your journey to find, because now you radiate it. You don't have to fake it, and you don't have to tell anybody. That's the beauty of this thing. I'm bringing it up because we're having this conversation and it's specific to what we're talking about, but I don't need to run around and say, I'm having fun. When I first got sober and was out with people socially, I think there was a little bit of that.
Oh yeah. And so the other part of it too, so when I first got sober, I was really I was scared to death. And because I thought in my mind, when I was first sober, if I was in a situation where other people were drinking, in my mind, because I'm the center of everyone's universe, there was a spotlight on me. And the fact that I was not drinking, everyone in the room knew Jerry is not drinking.
Yeah,
that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
And
this is your captain speaking. Jerry is not drinking.
Exactly.
Everybody knows. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I felt. And so with that in my mind, I wasn't having a good time, because that's all I was thinking. Everybody knows. Everybody's looking at me. Everybody knows. And I've got this shame still, like I'm an alcoholic. So I've filled with shame and guilt and all this stuff. And over a period of time, and Kevin really helped me with this. Over a period of time, he was like, hey, listen, nobody's even noticing. If you would just relax and quit worrying about it, it would just be yourself. Be like you are at home. And once he told me that, once I relaxed and got to the point where, yeah, I'm just going to be me. And I am so lucky. My life is crazy. I get to do so many
you do amazing, yeah,
crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
And all I have to do is just sit back, and somebody asks me about, what have you been doing lately? Well, actually, I just went skydiving with the Army Golden Knights. And then they're like, wait, what? So just being able to sit back and go, yeah, what I'm going to do is
you're in Hawaii. You're climbing Mount Everest, or where'd you climb?
No,
Kilimanjaro or whatever?
No. I went. I want to climb that if I can raise enough money. But I did rim to rim.
Yeah.
The Grand Canyon.
You Grand Canyon, and you saved a man too.
Well,
right? I mean,
hey, you know what? I will tell you this. I have to say this.
she can't take any compliments. Go ahead.
No, so whenever, the guy started having a lot of trouble. Turns out he's 88. But when he started having a lot of trouble.
This is when you're going rim to rim.
Yes.
Yeah, on the Grand Canyon.
So he gets down to the bottom, and I talked about, working out and getting in shape. I started going to D1 to try to get fit and blah, blah, blah. So I could do this rim to
D1
rim.
local workout place here. It's the best.
It is.
Yeah.
And so I get fit because I've got a goal. And so this guy gets to the bottom, and he says, I'm not going to make it. And so we decided, there were 3 of us that had joined up, singles that were hiking together. So we decided she'd stay back and I'd go get help. And so I got all the way out. And when I got all the way out, looking for help, when I finally found help, the ranger said they're going back in. And I'm like, the whole time, I'm going, well, he doesn't know me. He doesn't have my phone number. Really and truly, there's no way they could contact me. But then Pete in my ear is going, Esteemable Axe.
Oh my gosh.
Him and Kevin. Hey, Esteemable Axe, give you a self-esteem. And didn't you say I'm not going to leave you?
Yeah.
So
you went back?
I went back.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
No.
I mean, really and truly, but I mean, it was huge because, I mean, that particular day when I was on about mile 34, which it should have been 24, I might have said, I might have used your name in vain a few times.
Well, lest anyone think, I mean, that's like, I don't always do esteemable things, right? But like, and like, you have that message because like we go to meetings together and we talk about our feelings. And that's the beautiful thing about this program is like you become vulnerable and you kind of, as far as it's related to alcoholism and recovery, and sometimes not, you put your shit out there.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, stop doing, I still hear it in my head. My friend Murph, who got it from a guy who, that esteemable acts thing comes from my buddy Murph got sober in Philadelphia and he went to a meeting where there was a guy there who was kind of disruptive. I mean, he would go off topic and whatever, but the guy, and I would go to a meeting with Murph and he'd be like, oh, fuck, Bill's here. This is going to be but Bill would say, stop drinking and doing shit you're ashamed of. And that esteemable acts. And like, that's where so it comes from that guy to Murph, to me, to you on the Grand Canyon when you're saving this poor bastard. You're going back to help him. I mean, that is amazing. Now, you just came back from visit. I don't want to put yourself out there, but you were with your dad.
Yeah.
He was going through surgery. You're of serve. Like my old sponsor used to say, out of self. You're always out of self in service. Where does that come from, and what's that like?
It's funny that you asked this. So I had a coaching friend, an assistant coach, and he would always call me the favor trader because I'm going to do you a favor, but know that at some point I'm going to ask
That's
you.
That's transactional.
Yeah. So, like people used to tell me all the time, God, you do so much for so many people. Well, I did, but it was for something in return. It was always. Mm-hmm. I was putting it in the bag, like I would keep a tab. And so I was a favor trader.
Yeah.
Now, because of the program, that natural instinct I have to do things for other people kicks in, but I'm doing it for the right reason.
Yeah.
And before I wasn't doing it for the right reason. So, I don't know if I said this in a meeting, but I'm able to go be with my dad because I'm sober today. I would have made 100 excuses. I would have come up with, all kinds of reasons, or I may have told him I would be there and then just not shown up. And today I'm able to do those things because of the program.
You're always around other people too now. I mean, I know you take your time by yourself. We just talked about it. You're going solo in the Grand Canyon, but you do a great job. Like if you're not traveling with your husband or traveling, being of service, or, you're at your brother's basketball games, telling people to take signs down. Mark, I mean, it's pretty cool. Like you really are packing stuff into the stream of life.
Well, I've blessed, like I feel like I've been given this second chance.
Yeah.
And with the second chance, I got to grab a hold of it and do everything that I can do. And as cliche as it sounds, I want to be a role model for people to see that there's a great life after alcohol. And I'm living it, man.
What was the? We should end there, but I want to ask you one last thing. What's the one thing you would tell somebody that is like, I can't get it. I'll never get sober. It's hopeless for me.
Well, I learned this, and this was for me. Whenever someone told me how they did it, so I'm going to tell you how I was able to do it, and then if they're done, like if they are completely done. Now I've had people have contacted me and said they wanted to do what I've done, but they're not really serious yet. They're not done yet. But when they're done, then I'm gonna stick with you, and I'm gonna get you to a meeting, and I'm gonna, tell you that there's life after alcohol, and I'll do everything I can do to try to get you over the hump.
All right, Jerry. Thank you very much. I love you. That was great. Really, that was absolutely phenomenal. All right, we're going right now. By the way, this is an amendment, not an amendment, but this is just an addition. Oh, you thought we were done? We're not done. So you back to the kidney thing. You donated a kidney in sobriety 2 years ago to one of your players.
One of my players' moms.
One of your players.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, so
you were so desperate to give a kidney to somebody.
I just wanted to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I got contacted back because I was in the, I'd had a desire to donate to my brother, but I was drinking then. So then I was contacted to see if I was still interested in donating because it's huge, and I said yes, but I got somebody, and so she Nikki, her name is Nikki, and she had just been contacted, Dallas Methodist, for a kidney. She had gone up there. They got on the operating table, and the team cut the renal artery too short, so the kidney that she was supposed to get was not viable. Wow. So just devastation. And then she had to go back to dialysis. And so she was completely devastated. And everything just lines up. Like God has a plan, everything lines up. And so I'd been contacted. She had found out that kidney wasn't going to work out for her. So I just got her information, and I went through the process and found out I was a perfect match. And so I was able to donate to her.
So you heard this story?
Well, I mean, I knew her story. I knew that she was, because she
on
was
the table.
Yeah. I knew that she was, I'd coached her niece, I'd coached her daughter, so I.
So you heard the story, and then how did you get involved? You just reached out to them and said, I think.
Yeah. So I'd just been contacted by Mayo Clinic and asked if I wanted to donate. And when I heard that she was no longer able to get that kidney she thought was going to get, then I was like, yeah, but I got somebody. And so then I contacted her and said, hey, what's your full name? And she told me.
The mom?
Yeah.
How did you know you were a match?
I didn't. So I contacted the Mayo Clinic. I contacted Dallas Methodist and said, I want to see if I match. And so they said, okay. So they started the process.
And what was that like?
Process took 5 months. And so it was, it's unbelievable. They will not take a life to give a life. So you get the most thorough checkout that you could possibly get. And honestly, I was real nervous about that, going, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm doing this, because what if they come back and tell me my cholesterol's too high, or this or that, you got too much fat in your body or whatever. And so I didn't tell anybody. And the last round, she knew, because I had to get her information, and they had to do blood tests on the same day for me and her to see if our antigens matched. And they did. And so she knew I was going through the process. But whenever they contacted me and said, you're a match, you're a go, the team. So then after they do all the tests, then the team gets together and decides if I'm mentally, physically, and emotionally strong enough to handle this.
Yeah.
And
it's the only thing, I know this from Michelle, who we mentioned, it's the only surgery that, you're the patient, Jerry, as a donor, you get nothing out of this. All that can happen for you physically is loss. And they need to drill that into you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so they even asked
me. Hopefully you're going to come out fine. But yeah.
Yeah. So they asked me, and I had to be careful, because I like to, when I get a little nervous, I make jokes, and, so I had to make sure that I didn't make any of those jokes. So they didn't.
Like saying bomb on an airplane.
Yeah. And so they asked me several times, are you getting anything out of this? What do you expect to get out of this? Is this your best friend? No. How close a friend is she? How are you going to feel if her body doesn't accept the kidney? how all these different things. And I I wanted to give her a shot at having a different. I didn't save her life. I saved her lifestyle because she could have lived on dialysis, but she couldn't live the life that she's living now on dialysis. So when they contacted me and told me that I was good, that I was healthy enough, they had voted, and I guess they have some sort of deal that I'd been accepted.
Selection.
Yes. So that I'd been selected.
Yeah.
So
No, I just know that. Yeah.
So I'd been selected, and I was a go. Then I told them to contact her, and so they contacted her. Her son had been killed. He'd been shot, and he lost his life here in Waco. And so his birthday was on January 13th, and that date was the available date.
Holy crap.
And so she got her kidney from me on her son's birthday that she had lost. So it was kind of meaningful.
Would that have happened if you were getting drunk?
No, it would not have happened at all. It did not. But, it goes back to, and I didn't have this phrase back then, and she tells me all the time, I owe her so much. I mean, she's so gracious, but I got more out of it than she did. Again, back to esteemable acts, I got way more out of it than I believe that she did.
Yeah. It's the best postscript we've ever had here. All right. Thanks, Jerry.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.